My name is Sian. I'm a textile artist and I specialise in working with botanical dyes and the philosophy of biophilia. So I'm going to take you through a step-by-step process of dyeing with foraged plant materials, using iron as a modifier to be able to get two colours out of one pot. I like to dye with plants from the hedgerows and from my garden, and I like to forage for the materials when they're in abundance. So I was thinking today about dyeing with nettle, which I thought I had lots of in the garden, but it's still quite a young plant, so it's quite small, so I don't really like to use it when it's at that stage. So just to show you, those are the shades that you can achieve from dyeing with nettle. We're going to dye with plantain today. So there's an abundance of plantain growing in the garden at the moment, and it's taking over the gravel. So I'm going to pull some of these plantains out so that we can dye with. So I'm going to show you a few other plants that I've got growing in the garden. So I've got some woad growing here. They're quite new growth at the moment, but these leaves will yield a wonderful blue dye. The Celts were quite famous for using woad, where they smeared it on their faces during battle. So I've got an abundance of mint growing in the garden. This is only just the start of it. It grows really, really tall, and I dyed last year with the mint, and it gives a lovely sort of warm yellow colour. So I've also got rosemary growing in the garden, and you can dye with this plant too, using the leaves, not the flowers, but it's a really wonderful smell when you're dyeing with it, which I feel is really part of the sort of multi-sensory process of natural dyeing. So we're going to go into the studio and dye with the plantain that we've picked. These are the colours that I've achieved from dyeing with the plantain. There are two colours here, and this grey here is when I've added the iron mordant at the end. So just to take you through the materials that you'll need for this process, so I've got ferrous sulfate, which you can buy in natural dye supply shops. You can also make your own iron water by getting a load of rusty nails and adding vinegar and water to a jar. 1 part vinegar to 2 parts water. And you fill the jar with the nails and the vinegar and the water and give it a shake every once in a while. So that can be your modifier. We'll use the modifier right at the end of the dyeing process. So rubber gloves are a good idea. The iron can quite often stain your fingers, and you must be really careful because it can stain your clothes easily as well. You need some weighing scales to measure out the iron. You'll need pre-mordanted cloth. We're using wool today, which has been woven in a mill very close to here in West Wales. So I prepared the dye vat last night. So I chopped up my plant material, I added into the pot, and I filled it with water to cover the plant material. I placed that onto the heat, brought it up to boiling point, and let it simmer for about half an hour. So that's all ready to go. Okay, I'm just going to strain off the leaves. I've got a few gone into the... There we go. So we're just going to make sure we get all the liquid out from the leaves by squeezing the plant matter. It's great for your compost afterwards. It's a nice smell actually, it's quite sweet. Alright, we'll just get all the rest of the leaves out of there. drops. And then we're going to return the liquid back into the pot. So this has been soaking. I generally use about 200 grams of leaves to about 100 grams of cloth. So we're going to add that to our dye bath. Take that up to boiling point, gradually over about 45 minutes, and then leave to simmer for 45 minutes. And then we'll leave the cloth to cool in the pot afterwards. So the cloth has been immersed in the dye pot for about an hour and a half. We're going to take the cloth out into a metal bowl and leave it to cool down slightly, because we're going to cut this, just drain off a little bit of the liquid. We're going to cut this piece of cloth in half so that we are following our method of getting two colours from one vat. So we've got about 100 grams of cloth, about 2 grams of iron granules will be enough to grey off the colour. So about 2 grams is generally about a heaped teaspoon. So we're going to just sprinkle that directly into the vat. Make sure that we sprinkle that all around and give it a good stir. Again, when working with fine powders, you want to be working in a well ventilated room, and with adding that to the pot you also maybe perhaps open a window. It's not too hazardous, but it's just good to have some good ventilation. So we are going to put the heat back on here, and I'm going to put some gloves on because the iron solution stains your fingers. So we're going to add the 1/2 of cloth back into the dye pot. I'm just going to give that one last stir. By stirring, you're ensuring that you're going to get a good even coverage of colour. So I'm going to immerse that back into the pot. Now you don't want to leave it in the solution too long. About 5 minutes will suffice. And just bring that back up to just a little bit of boiling point. So 5 or 10 minutes in the pot, and then we'll remove that. So we'll put this one out now. It's been in there for 5 minutes. And we'll just squeeze out the remaining dye. The process of modifying is also called saddening, which is quite an interesting term. So we're just going to let that cool down a little bit so we don't shock the cloth. Right, so we will wash our cloth, juggling the bowls. Right, so we're going to rinse it first, and then we're going to add a little bit of detergent and water. So we'll wash this one first. Give it the first rinse. Just need to wash away any excess dye. And I'm going to give it a rinse with the detergent. And then a final rinse in the last one. And then we'll do the same again with a modified piece of cloth. There we go, so we've got one modified piece. And our first bath. We've got 2 colours out of 1 pot and from the garden.